The station at the edge of time. The station was unlike any other. It stood in the middle of nowhere, a lone platform surrounded by an endless expanse of fog. The air was thick with the scent of iron and ozone, and the only sound was the distant hum of machinery, like the heartbeat of some great, unseen beast. The sign above the platform read simply, "Yesterday." Evelyn Harper stood on the platform, clutching a crumpled photograph in her hand. It was a picture of her sister, Lily, taken just days before the accident. Lily's smile was radiant, her eyes full of life. Evelyn had been too late to save her that day, but now she had a chance to change everything. The train was her last hope. The conductor appeared out of the fog, his face obscured by the brim of his hat. He was tall and gaunt, his uniform a deep, inky black that seemed to absorb the light around him. His voice was low and gravelly, like the sound of distant thunder. "Ticket, please," he said, holding out a gloved hand. Evelyn handed him the ticket she had received in the mail just days ago. It was a simple piece of paper, but it felt heavy in her hand, as if it carried the weight of her entire life. The conductor examined it briefly before nodding and stepping aside. "Welcome aboard," he said, "but be warned, the past is a fragile thing. Change it, and you may not like what you find." Evelyn hesitated for a moment, then stepped onto the train. The interior was unlike anything she had ever seen. The walls were lined with intricate clockwork, gears turning and ticking in perfect harmony. The seats were plush and comfortable, but there was an air of unease that hung over everything, as if the train itself was alive and watching her. She found a seat near the window and sat down, her heart pounding in her chest. The train began to move, the fog outside swirling and shifting as they picked up speed. Evelyn closed her eyes and took a deep breath, trying to calm her nerves. She had to do this, for Lily. The conductor appeared again, this time standing at the front of the car. He cleared his throat, and the passengers, there were only a handful of them, turned to listen. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "welcome to the train to yesterday. This is no ordinary journey. Each of you has boarded this train with a purpose, a desire to change something in your past. But I must warn you, the past is not so easily altered. Every action has consequences, and those consequences can ripple through time in ways you cannot predict." Evelyn felt a chill run down her spine. She had heard the stories, of course. The train to yesterday was a legend, whispered about in hushed tones by those who had lost everything. But she had never believed it was real until now. The conductor continued, his voice grave. "The price of changing the past is steep. Some of you may find what you seek, but others may lose even more than they already have. Think carefully before you act. Once the past is changed, there is no going back." The train lurched suddenly, and the world outside the window began to blur. Evelyn felt a strange sensation, as if she were being pulled in every direction at once. The gears in the walls spun faster, the ticking growing louder and more frantic. She closed her eyes, gripping the armrests of her seat as the train hurtled through time. When she opened her eyes again, the world outside the window had changed. The fog was gone, replaced by a familiar landscape. She recognized the street, the houses, the trees. It was her neighborhood, but it was different somehow. The colors were brighter, the air fresher. She realized with a start that she was back in the past. The train came to a stop at a small, unassuming station. The conductor appeared at her side, his expression unreadable. "This is your stop," he said. "Remember what I told you. The past is fragile. Handle it with care." Evelyn nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. She stepped off the train and onto the platform, the photograph of Lily still clutched in her hand. She knew what she had to do. She had to save her sister. But as she walked away from the station, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The world around her seemed too perfect, too still. It was as if time itself was holding its breath, waiting for her to make her move. And then she saw her. Lily was standing at the end of the street, her back to Evelyn. She was alive, just as she had been before the accident. Evelyn's heart swelled with hope, but as she took a step forward, she felt a strange resistance, as if the air around her had thickened. She pushed through it, determined to reach her sister. But as she got closer, she noticed something strange. Lily's shadow was wrong. It was too long, too dark, and it seemed to move on its own, twisting and writhing like a living thing. Evelyn stopped in her tracks, her breath catching in her throat. Something was wrong. Something was very, very wrong. The shadow of yesterday. Evelyn stood frozen, her eyes locked on Lily's shadow. It was no ordinary shadow. It was too sharp, too defined, and it moved independently of Lily, curling and stretching like smoke. The air around her sister seemed to warp, as if reality itself was bending under some unseen force. "Lily!" Evelyn called out, her voice trembling. Lily turned, her face lighting up with a smile. "Evelyn, what are you doing here?" For a moment, Evelyn forgot about the shadow. Her sister was alive, standing right in front of her, just as she remembered her. The sight was almost too much to bear. She wanted to run to her, to hug her and never let go. But that shadow, it was still there, flickering at the edges of her vision. I came to see you," Evelyn stammered, forcing a smile. "I missed you." Lily laughed, a sound so familiar it made Evelyn's heart ache. "You saw me yesterday. Are you feeling okay?" Evelyn nodded, though her mind was racing. She had to be careful. The conductor's warning echoed in her head. The past is fragile. Handle it with care. She couldn't afford to make a mistake. "I'm fine," she said. "I just wanted to spend some time with you." Lily tilted her head, her expression softening. "You're acting weird, Evie. Is something wrong?" Evelyn hesitated. How could she explain what was happening? How could she tell her sister that she was here to save her from a future that hadn't happened yet? She couldn't, not without risking everything. "No, nothing's wrong," she said finally. "Let's just go for a walk, okay?" Lily shrugged. "Sure, but you're buying ice cream." Evelyn managed a weak laugh. "Deal." As they walked down the street, Evelyn kept glancing at Lily's shadow. It was still there, still writhing, but Lily didn't seem to notice. Evelyn tried to focus on her sister, on the sound of her voice, on the way she laughed. But the shadow was always there, a constant reminder that something was wrong. They reached the park, a place they had spent countless afternoons together. The sun was shining, the birds were singing, and for a moment, Evelyn allowed herself to believe that everything was normal. They sat on a bench, and Lily leaned her head on Evelyn's shoulder. "I'm glad you're here," Lily said softly. "I've been feeling off lately, like something bad is going to happen." Evelyn's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" Lily shrugged. "I don't know. It's probably nothing. Just a weird feeling." Evelyn clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms. She had to do something. She had to save her sister. But how? The accident was still days away. If she could just keep Lily safe until then. "Lily," she said slowly, "promise me something." "What?" "Promise me you'll be careful. Don't take any risks, okay? Just stay safe." Lily laughed. "You're really being weird today, Evie. But okay, I promise." Evelyn forced a smile, but inside, she was screaming. She couldn't lose her sister again. She wouldn't. As the day wore on, Evelyn tried to enjoy her time with Lily, but the shadow was always there, lurking at the edges of her vision. It seemed to grow darker, more defined, as if it was feeding on her fear. She tried to ignore it, but it was impossible. Finally, as the sun began to set, Lily stood up. "I should get home. Mom's probably wondering where I am." Evelyn nodded, her heart heavy. "Yeah, I'll walk you." They made their way back to Lily's house, the shadow trailing behind them like a silent predator. Evelyn's mind was racing. She had to find a way to stop the accident, but she didn't know how. She couldn't just tell Lily not to go to the park that day. It would sound crazy. And even if she did, what if it didn't work? What if the accident happened anyway? When they reached Lily's house, Evelyn hugged her sister tightly. "Be careful, okay?" Lily smiled. "I will. Stop worrying so much, Evie. Everything's going to be fine." Evelyn watched as Lily walked up the steps to her house, the shadow following close behind. She wanted to scream, to grab her sister and run away, but she couldn't. She had to trust that she could change things. She had to believe that she could save her. As she turned to leave, she felt a hand on her shoulder. She spun around, her heart pounding, but there was no one there. The street was empty, the houses silent, but the feeling of being watched lingered, a cold, creeping sensation that made her skin crawl. She hurried back to the station, her mind racing. The train was still there, waiting for her. The conductor stood on the platform, his expression unreadable. "Did you find what you were looking for?" he asked. Evelyn shook her head. "Not yet, but I will." The conductor nodded. "Remember, the past is fragile. One wrong move, and everything could fall apart." Evelyn stepped onto the train, her heart heavy. She had to find a way to save Lily, but the shadow was a constant reminder that something was wrong. She didn't know what it was, but she knew she had to figure it out before it was too late. As the train began to move, she closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She had to be strong, for Lily, but as the train hurtled through time, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was running out of time. The shadow was still there, lurking in the corners of her mind, waiting for her to make a mistake. And when she opened her eyes again, she realized with a sinking feeling that something had changed. The world outside the window was different, darker. The colors were muted, the air heavier. She didn't know where or when she was, but she knew one thing for certain. The past was no longer the same. The ripple effect. The train came to a stop at a station shrouded in twilight. The air was thick with an eerie stillness, and the platform was deserted. Evelyn stepped off the train, her heart pounding. This wasn't the past she had left behind. Something had changed, something fundamental. The conductor appeared beside her, his face as unreadable as ever. "You've altered the timeline," he said, his voice low and grave. "The ripple effect has begun." Evelyn turned to him, her eyes wide with panic. "What does that mean? What's happening?" The conductor gestured to the world around them. "Look closely. The past you knew is no longer the same. Your actions have created a new reality, one where the consequences of your choices are still unfolding." Evelyn's breath quickened as she took in her surroundings. The streets were familiar, but the details were wrong. The houses were darker, their windows shuttered. The trees were twisted, their branches clawing at the sky like skeletal hands. Even the air felt heavier, as if the weight of the world was pressing down on her. "I didn't mean to change anything," she whispered. "I just wanted to save my sister." The conductor's gaze was piercing. Intentions mean little to time. Every action, no matter how small, has consequences. And those consequences can be unpredictable. Evelyn clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms. "What do I do? How do I fix this?" The conductor shook his head. "There is no fixing the past. Once it's changed forever. But you can still influence the outcome. Be careful, Evelyn. The choices you make now will determine not only your future, but the future of everyone around you." With that, he turned and disappeared into the shadows, leaving Evelyn alone on the platform. She felt a surge of desperation, but she knew she couldn't give up. She had to find Lily. She had to make sure her sister was safe. She started walking, her footsteps echoing in the empty streets. The neighborhood was eerily silent, as if the entire world was holding its breath. She passed by familiar landmarks. The corner store where she and Lily used to buy candy, the park where they had spent so many afternoons, but everything felt wrong, like a distorted reflection of the past. When she reached Lily's house, her heart sank. The lights were off and the front door was slightly ajar. She pushed it open, her hands trembling, and stepped inside. "Lily?" she called out, her voice barely above a whisper. There was no answer. The house was dark and cold, the air thick with the scent of dust and decay. Evelyn's stomach churned as she made her way through the rooms, each one more unsettling than the last. The furniture was covered in sheets, the walls bare, as if no one had lived here in years. Finally, she reached Lily's bedroom. The door was closed, but she could hear a faint sound coming from inside. A soft, rhythmic tapping, like fingers drumming on wood. She pushed the door open, her heart pounding in her chest. The room was empty, save for a single figure sitting on the bed. It was Lily, but she was different. Her face was pale, her eyes hollow, and her shadow, that terrible, writhing shadow, was now a part of her, twisting and curling around her body like a living thing. "Lily," Evelyn whispered, her voice trembling. Lily turned to her, her expression blank. "You shouldn't have come back, Evie." Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. "What are you talking about? I came to save you." Lily shook her head slowly. "You can't save me. Not anymore. You changed the past, and now I'm stuck here." Evelyn stepped closer, her heart breaking at the sight of her sister. "I don't understand. What happened?" Lily's voice was hollow, devoid of emotion. "You tried to stop the accident, but you didn't think about what would happen next. The car swerved to avoid me, but it hit someone else. A little girl. She died. Evie. Because of you." Evelyn felt as if the ground had been ripped out from under her. No, that's not possible. I didn't mean to." "It doesn't matter what you meant," Lily interrupted, her voice rising. "You changed the past, and now everything is wrong." The girl's death set off a chain reaction. Her parents divorced. Her father lost his job. Her mother, she couldn't handle the grief. She took her own life. "And it's all because of you." Evelyn's legs gave out, and she sank to the floor, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't know. I didn't think." Lily stood up, her shadow writhing around her like a living thing. "You didn't think, Evie. That's the problem. You were so focused on saving me that you didn't consider the consequences. And now I'm trapped here, in this twisted version of the past, and there's no way out." Evelyn looked up at her sister, her heart breaking. "I'm sorry, Lily. I'm so sorry. I just wanted to save you." Lily's expression softened, and for a moment, she looked like the sister Evelyn remembered. "I know you did, Evie, but some things can't be changed. Not without a price." Evelyn reached out, desperate to touch her sister, to hold her and make everything right. But as her hand got closer, Lily began to fade, her form dissolving into shadow. "Wait!" Evelyn cried, scrambling to her feet. "Don't go, please." But it was too late. Lily was gone, leaving only the faint echo of her voice in the air. "Be careful, Evie. The past is fragile. And the future is even worse." Evelyn stood alone in the empty room, her heart shattered. She had tried to save her sister, but instead, she had destroyed everything. The weight of her guilt was crushing, and she didn't know how to move forward. But she couldn't give up. Not yet. She had to find a way to fix this, no matter the cost. The fractured future. Evelyn stumbled out of Lily's house, her mind reeling. The world around her was a nightmarish version of the past she had tried to save. The streets were darker, the air colder, and the shadows seemed to stretch longer, as if they were alive and watching her. She felt a deep, gnawing guilt in her chest, but beneath it was a flicker of determination. She couldn't give up. Not yet. The train station loomed ahead, its platform bathed in an unnatural glow. The conductor stood there, waiting, his expression as unreadable as ever. Evelyn approached him, her voice trembling. "I need to fix this," she said. "I need to undo what I've done." The conductor tilted his head, his eyes narrowing. "The past cannot be undone, but there may be a way to mitigate the damage. However, the price will be steep." Evelyn didn't hesitate. "I'll pay it, whatever it takes." The conductor studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Very well, but understand this. The further you go, the more fragile time becomes. One misstep, and you could shatter it entirely." Evelyn swallowed hard but nodded. "I understand." The conductor gestured toward the train, and Evelyn boarded once more. The interior felt different this time, colder, darker. The gears in the walls spun erratically, their ticking uneven and jarring. She took a seat, her hands clenched into fists, and the train began to move. This time, the journey was different. The world outside the window was a blur of fractured images. Moments in time, broken and disjointed. She saw glimpses of her own life, of Lily's life, and of the lives of strangers, all twisted and distorted by her actions. The weight of what she had done pressed down on her, but she forced herself to focus. She had to make this right. When the train came to a stop, Evelyn stepped off onto a platform she didn't recognize. The air was thick with the scent of smoke and ash, and the sky was a deep, angry red. The landscape was barren, the ground cracked and dry, and in the distance, she could see the ruins of a city, its buildings crumbling and lifeless. "Where am I?" she whispered. "This is the future," the conductor said, appearing beside her. "Or rather, one possible future, a future shaped by your choices." Evelyn's heart sank as she took in the desolation around her. This can't be real." "It is as real as the past you tried to change," the conductor replied. "Every action has consequences, Evelyn, and the consequences of your actions have rippled through time, creating this." Evelyn shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "I didn't mean for this to happen. I just wanted to save my sister. And yet here we are," the conductor said, his voice cold. "The question is, what will you do now?" Evelyn took a deep breath, forcing herself to think. She couldn't undo what she had done, but maybe she could find a way to fix it. Maybe she could find a way to save both Lily and the future. "I need to go back," she said. "Back to the moment I changed. I need to make it right." The conductor nodded. "Very well, but remember, the past is fragile. And the future is even more so." Evelyn stepped back onto the train, her resolve hardening. She had made a mistake, but she wasn't going to let it define her. She was going to fix this no matter what it took. The train began to move, and once again, the world outside the window blurred into a chaotic swirl of fractured moments. Evelyn closed her eyes, focusing on the image of Lily's face, on the sound of her laughter, on the memory of the life they had shared. She held onto that memory, letting it guide her. When the train came to a stop, Evelyn stepped off onto the platform of her own time. The air was crisp and clear, and the world felt normal. But she knew better. She knew that beneath the surface, everything was fragile, teetering on the edge of collapse. She made her way to the park, the place where it had all begun. She saw Lily there, sitting on a bench, her face turned toward the sun. For a moment, Evelyn allowed herself to hope. Maybe she could fix this. Maybe she could make everything right. But as she approached, she noticed something strange. Lily's shadow was still there, still writhing, but it was different now. It was darker, more defined, and it seemed to pulse with a life of its own. Evelyn's heart sank as she realized the truth. The shadow wasn't just a part of Lily. It was a part of her. It was the consequence of her actions, the price she had paid for trying to change the past. "Lily," she called out, her voice trembling. Lily turned to her, her expression calm but distant. "You're back." Evelyn nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry, Lily. I didn't mean for any of this to happen." Lily smiled, but it was a sad, hollow smile. "I know you didn't, Evie, but you can't change the past. Not without a price." Evelyn reached out, desperate to touch her sister, to hold her and make everything right. But as her hand got closer, Lily began to fade, her form dissolving into shadow. "Wait!" Evelyn cried, scrambling to her feet. "Don't go, please." But it was too late. Lily was gone, leaving only the faint echo of her voice in the air. "Be careful, Evie. The past is fragile. And the future is even worse." Evelyn stood alone in the empty park, her heart shattered. She had tried to save her sister, but instead, she had destroyed everything. The weight of her guilt was crushing, and she didn't know how to move forward. But she couldn't give up. Not yet. She had to find a way to fix this, no matter the cost. The final stop. Evelyn stood in the park, the weight of her choices pressing down on her like a suffocating blanket. The air around her felt heavy, charged with an unnatural energy, as if the world itself was holding its breath. She had tried to save Lily, but in doing so, she had unraveled the fabric of time. Now, she was left with a fractured reality and a future that seemed beyond repair. The conductor appeared beside her, his presence as silent and foreboding as ever. "You've reached the end of the line," he said, his voice low and grave. "The final stop is near." Evelyn turned to him, her eyes filled with desperation. "What do you mean? Where are we going?" The conductor gestured toward the horizon, where the sky was beginning to darken. "The final stop is a place where time itself ends. It is the consequence of your actions, Evelyn. The ripple effect has grown too great, and now the timeline is collapsing." Evelyn's heart raced as she looked around. The park, once vibrant and full of life, was now fading, its colors bleeding away into a dull gray. The trees, the benches, even the ground beneath her feet seemed to dissolve into nothingness. She felt a surge of panic, but the conductor's calm demeanor kept her grounded. "Is there any way to stop it?" she asked, her voice trembling. The conductor shook his head. "The damage is done. The past, the present, and the future are all intertwined, and your actions have severed those connections. The only thing left is to face the end." Evelyn clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms. "No, I can't accept that. There has to be a way to fix this." The conductor studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. "There is one possibility," he said slowly, "but it comes at a great cost." "What is it?" Evelyn asked, her voice desperate. "You can reset the timeline," the conductor replied, "but to do so, you must sacrifice yourself. Your existence, your memories, your very soul. All of it will be erased. The timeline will reset to the moment before you boarded the train, and everything will continue as it was meant to. But you will be gone. Forever." Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. The weight of the conductor's words settled over her like a shroud. To save Lily, to save the future, she would have to give up everything. Her life, her memories, her very existence. All of it would be erased. She closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face. She thought of Lily, of the life they had shared, of the love they had for each other. She thought of the future she had destroyed, of the lives she had ruined. And she knew what she had to do. "I'll do it," she said, her voice steady despite the tears. "I'll sacrifice myself." The conductor nodded, his expression softening ever so slightly. "It is a noble choice," he said. "But know this. Once the timeline is reset, no one will remember you. Not Lily, not your parents, not anyone. You will be gone, as if you never existed." Evelyn swallowed hard but nodded. "I understand. But if it means saving Lily, saving the future, then it's worth it." The conductor gestured toward the train, which had appeared on the platform once more. "Then it is time. Board the train, and we will take you to the final stop." Evelyn stepped onto the train, her heart heavy but resolute. The interior was different now, cold and empty, the gears in the walls silent and still. She took a seat, her hands trembling, and the train began to move. The journey was unlike any she had experienced before. The world outside the window was a swirling void, a chaotic maelstrom of light and darkness. She felt a strange sense of peace as the train hurtled forward, as if she were being pulled toward something inevitable, something eternal. When the train came to a stop, Evelyn stepped off onto a platform that seemed to exist outside of time itself. The air was still, the silence absolute. In the distance, she could see a faint light, pulsing gently, like a heartbeat. "This is it," the conductor said, appearing beside her. "The end of time, the moment of reset." Evelyn nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. She turned to the conductor, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you," she said, "for giving me this chance." The conductor inclined his head. "It was your choice, Evelyn, and it is a choice that will save countless lives." Evelyn took a deep breath, then turned toward the light. She walked forward, each step feeling heavier than the last. As she approached the light, she felt a strange warmth, a sense of peace that she had never known before. She closed her eyes, letting the light envelop her. And in that moment, she felt herself dissolving, her memories, her soul, her very existence fading away. The last thing she saw was Lily's face, smiling at her, full of life and love. And then, there was nothing. Epilogue. Lily Harper sat on a park bench, the sun shining brightly overhead. She felt a strange sense of déjà vu, as if she had been here before, but she couldn't quite place it. She shook her head, brushing the feeling aside, and stood up. As she walked away, she glanced back at the bench, a faint smile on her lips. For a moment, she thought she saw someone sitting there. A woman with tears in her eyes, smiling back at her. But when she blinked, the woman was gone. Lily shrugged, the strange feeling fading as quickly as it had come. She turned and walked away, her heart light, her future bright. And somewhere, in the void beyond time, Evelyn Harper smiled.